Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. This is William Keat of lawandalchemy.org and commonlawconstitution.org. Welcome. So this is a video that I've been struggling over for a few days. Quite a few of them at the moment are like that, actually. And I've been thinking about this for quite a long time and sort of thinking about what to put in it. And this is an important one. This is going to be one of those sort of longer term resources that I think are going to be useful for people. So what this is, and I haven't even come up with the title yet, but it's going to be something along the lines, once it's uploaded to YouTube, it will be something like, there is a requirement, in order to understand the Constitution, there is a requirement for understanding natural law. Something like that. But it will be a bit more precise than that. So this is tricky because this is going to trigger people, I think. And I have had some communications already. I've noticed some discussion and some commentary, and people are getting a little bit hot under the collar about what I'm saying here. And my feeling is that you don't really understand the Constitution properly, the legitimacy of the English Constitution, unless you understand natural law. And a lot of people are assuming out there that they do understand natural law, and I know they don't. And the reason why that's quite revealing, or I should say that a different way, when people come out with certain things, certain sentences, they express certain things in certain ways, it reveals that they actually don't understand natural law, and it reveals that they haven't been into that subject. You can actually tell. So somebody who has done some work on natural law can tell immediately, just like that, whether somebody understands some of these deeper principles and these deeper insights. So it's quite revealing, actually, and people need to be careful that if you want to say that you understand natural law and you throw the term natural law around and go, oh yes, it's definitely important, well, maybe you should do some work on it and you should watch some videos. I'm hoping to address as much as I can in this video in as short a space as I possibly can. So we're going to go through some pretty deep stuff. It's not deep for the whole subject of natural law. It's barely scratching the surface. But for this video, which I'm intending to be about 45 minutes long, it might go over. I just don't know. This is going to be quite deep material to pack into that short space of time. So bear with me. Some of you will not like it. Some of you will love it. And hopefully it will have within it some clarifications as to what natural law is and why it's so critical for the understanding of the Constitution. Because I don't think you really get the Constitution until you understand this. So, here goes. Okay, so what is the subject of natural law all about? So people think, I think, that it's like a man-made law, or they think of it as if it's a man-made law. They know that it isn't because it's natural and it's something to do with the universe, and but they're still thinking of it as if it's a system. It's something that man has created or dreamt up. It isn't. We'll get onto that in a minute. It's quite esoteric. That means that it's inaccessible. Okay, so that means it's not quick, it's not accessible information, it's not straightforward, you're not going to get it just like that. In fact, many people study natural law for years. But I think you can get enough of a sense of natural law if the individual who's putting it over, me in this case, does their job properly. And sometimes it might be that I don't. So that's what I'm trying to do here in this video, is to give you a sense of what natural law really is, better than I've ever done before. So I might fail in that, but let's see. So people tend to refuse to look at natural law. Why? It's usually through fear or some sort of superstition, and they see it as something that's sort of anti-religious or anti their faith. It isn't. It's really important that you understand that that isn't the case. It actually supports your faith. But I am going to be saying some things in here that some people of a religious faith might not like. And I'm going to say it anyway. But let's just see if you're brave enough to sit through it anyway so that you can see what it is that I'm saying. Because what I'm not trying to do here is to tear down a religious belief or a faith of any sort. Not trying to do that at all. In fact, I reckon that your understanding of natural law props up your faith even more. So people are dissuaded from looking at this. It will give you massively deep insights into the nature of man and the nature of reality in ways that you might think you know now, but you probably don't. Okay, unless you've properly been into natural law, you will not believe some of the insights that it will give you that you wouldn't have had before. You generally don't obtain this information through religion. Religion is generally considered in spiritual sciences, which is what natural law is, as exoteric, meaning accessible, a bit closer to the surface. Accessibility for the masses. Now that sounds really patronizing, but there is truth in that. This is what we describe as natural law, is the body of the esoteric hidden sciences, or the occult body of knowledge. And of course, immediately everybody goes, "Well, I'm not going into that." Well, maybe you should have a bit of a spine and actually go into it, and then you can decide for yourself whether you think that this is evil information or in some way destructive. Because I would say it's fundamentally not that. Okay. So this is about exercising your mind over long periods of time. Okay, it's going to take practice, this. This is not something you can sort of look at for 20 minutes, half an hour. This is something that some people go, as I said at the beginning, study for years. And you need to get into it deeply to get this stuff. The esoteric, in the past, in ancient times, was held by the mystery traditions or the mystery schools. And they predate religions by a long way, many of them. In ancient times, people were quite often refused initiation into these schools and into this information. Yeah, and there's good reason for that. Why? Because they weren't ready to hear it. That's the reason. How do you know that you're ready to receive this information? Frankly, whether you are genuinely interested. If you are genuinely interested in such a way that it propels you into the subject to cause you to look deeply and want to hear more about it, then you know that you're ready for the information. Many people will not, and will just listen to this and go, "Oh, that's interesting," and then they won't do anything about it, and nothing will happen. And that will be most people, by the way. Most people will ultimately reject it, probably. Often they'll say they're interested, and they'll, as I said at the beginning, they'll throw commonly heard terms around that they might have picked up, but generally they won't do any work on this information. Now, in the past, there was a recognition that people shouldn't receive this information precisely for this reason. Because if people aren't ready to hear it, they won't hear the deep messages within it, and they won't hear the truths correctly. In other words, they will distort the messages. It's sometimes called profaning. You will profane the message. And that happens through internal psychological filters. It's uncomfortable in some way. So that's why it happens. Okay, so people distort and filter out things because they don't really want to hear it. Yeah, because it's out of alignment with their current patterns of thinking through programming and so on. So worse than just not hearing it is the tendency to actually profane it or twist it. And as I say, that's down to internal lies and discomfort. So there is a readiness or a lack of readiness to receive this information. But I would say that we're running out of time. It's because, it's now more critical for people to hear this. And so people like Mark Passio, Corey Endrelat, Larkin Rose, Sarah El Khaldi and others are all saying the same thing. Yeah, they're basically saying what I'm saying now, which is we're chucking out this what would have been the case in ancient mystery traditions. Well, you're not ready to receive this information, so we're not going to, we're not doing that anymore. It is absolutely critical at the moment that people hear this, and otherwise we're in deep trouble. Okay. So what is natural law? Let's get into it. So it's a science, first of all. It's not a religion. It's not a belief. It's a science. It's about wisdom teachings. That's teachings that bring about very deep insights into the way that our reality functions and the nature of humans. The way that we think, the psychology of humans, and the way that we interact with our reality and with each other. Yeah? So this is about observations of reality that ordinarily, I should say, are generally missed out and not perceived or understood by most. Yeah, so without this study, you generally will miss these kinds of truths and insights. So I'm hearing some crazy comments from people sometimes in the communities out there. Where people say things like, oh well, we've got lots of different possible solutions. We've got the sort of common law material. There's always that as an option, but we've also got the natural law option. As if natural law, first of all, sits alongside other things, and that it's an option. No, it's not an option. You don't get to opt for this. Okay, you cannot escape natural law. Okay, its effects are working on you regardless, like physical laws, like the laws of gravity, the laws of thermodynamics. Yeah, that's what we're really saying. Okay, so but those are the physical laws of nature, which is not what natural law is. Natural law is much more esoteric. It's about the behavior of sentient, intelligent beings and how they interact with reality and with each other, as I've said. Yeah. But nevertheless, there's still natural law does start to cross over into the natural world, of course. So an example of that might be sort of, biodynamic farming, for example, which looks at the rhythms of the seasons and deeper mysteries like the effect of the moon on plants, things like that. You're starting to get outside the sort of normal natural world or the accepted conventional understanding of the natural world into things that actually are still true, but they're subtle tendencies that we need to look at more closely to come to understand that. Yeah. A deeper understanding comes from a close observation of the patterns and rhythms of reality, human interactions. Engaging in this causes a change in personal and the collective consciousness. Yeah, your perception is not necessarily truth. Okay, your perception can come into alignment with truth through this study. Okay, so spotting and coming to understand patterns of cause and effect, for example, is one of the things that will help with that. Understanding how these patterns affect you and other people. Yeah, how you interact with the universe and how people interact with each other. I've said that already. I've just got a few notes here that I'm just making sure that I'm including. So natural law is a deep understanding of the dynamics of reality. That's another way of explaining it. Yeah, cause and effect within the natural order of things. This is about a study of how effects are delivered back to you, whether you like it or not, or whether you believe in it or not. You don't have a choice. Natural law determines how our reality unfolds over time based on the way we act and behave. You get effects back from the universe based on your choices and your actions. You can't argue with this, and it isn't something that you can select as an option or discard. Okay, it's the mechanics of the way the universe functions. It is spiritual, but it's not a religion. Okay, this is the study of spiritual science. That's what is often called. So natural law, the term natural law, it comes from, if you want to look at the etymology of the word natural, probably goes back to Comitian times, which is pre-Egypt. And so you're probably looking at the word nater, which is spelled N-T, lowercase r. Nater, I think pronounced nater. Probably actually it would be pronounced netjer, in fact, because the T is capital and sometimes it's a TJ or considered that. And what does it mean? What does it refer to? It refers to God or the Godhead or the self-created one. So we're talking about the creator of the universe, source. Okay? So this is where those of a faith might get a bit nervous at this point. No, keep going. Keep going with this. It's important, right? So imagine that the universe is a complex machine or a complex system. That's a little bit patronizing to the universe to say that it's a bit like a complex system, because that would make us think, like a computer or, a complex system that man has made. It's much more than that, obviously, but it helps sometimes to think of it like that. You are a component within that, and your behavior will have micro effects on everything else around you. So if you've done the electronics, you could think of yourself as a electronics component, a capacitor or a resistor or something in the circuit. And you have input, output, you have, all of these sorts of things. The study of natural law is a deep dive into the study of those microdynamics of how the complex systems of the universe work. We can begin to construct or come to a deeper understanding of how morality really works by examining micro actions, decisions, attitudes, and expressions of us. So this is really all about, I suppose you could say, the recognition and study of reality being based on cause and effect, because that in turn reveals deeper insights into how morality itself works. Okay, so what are we going to get to here in relation to the Constitution? Okay, because let's come back to sort of like the normal world of things, right? So this is really all about the construction of our ideology and our values, because at the moment we feel unsafe. Why? Because we see an increasing attack on our freedoms, through threat of punishment, increased restriction, all the rest of it. Now, what this all comes down to is the definition of right and wrong behaviour, which in turn takes us into morality and then justice, and then into healing and punishment and all those things, right? So why do we have this issue? Yeah, well, ultimately, this is all about how our freedoms impact on the freedoms of others, and how we manage that in the aggregate or in the collective. Yeah, so problems come about when you try to generalize on what is acceptable and what isn't. Yeah, so that's what we're kind of generalizing on when we come down to government and statute. Yeah, this is about the boundaries of right and wrong behavior. Yeah, and right and wrong behavior now has to become the opinion of someone else in government or a group, rather than what is found in truth or dictated by reality. See, that's the difference, yeah? So that potentially means that through that approximation of laws in government, statute, or what you're effectively doing is rewriting right and wrong behaviour. You are sort of making up new right behaviour and removing right behaviour that already exists in the natural order of things, which we haven't got onto yet, okay? But we're going to start to look at, does natural law help us see what is acceptable behaviour and what isn't acceptable behaviour? What is the morality that it's hinting at here? So one's values are all about becoming clear on how an individual should conduct themselves and how society and our community should function morally. So this is about what is acceptable and what isn't. Yeah. Now, there are different ways of obtaining that spiritual and moral truth. Okay, I think there are three ways of obtaining spiritual and moral truth, because what we're trying to do here is to get to a sense of what morality is all about. Why? Because we're all sharing a community together, and so it matters. It matters what our values are, yeah? And we can obtain that. We can obtain a sense of what our values should be from three things. One, from a religion, which we've talked about. You can evidence it through teachings, through holy books, through liturgy, and so on. Through prayer, even. Yeah. So you can obtain an understanding or a knowledge of what is acceptable behaviour, you could say, through your religion, through the way that you are living within your faith, if you have a religious faith. That's the first one. The second one is through your conscience, because we all have built into us a conscience, and well, most of us do. It's not actually everybody, but most of us have that conscience. But to a varying degree, we become quite good in constructing an inner narrative that helps us to not listen to that conscience, which we're going to get into a little bit in the human psychology of it. And so that's the conscience. And then the third thing is through knowledge and reason and logic, by looking at patterns and how things unfold in relationships. And it's that third thing, perhaps with a little bit of the second one, that is really what the esoteric body of knowledge is all about, okay? And the understanding of natural law. It's about coming to know and recognize how morality relates to truth. Okay, and that's what we're going to get into. So what I'm going to say is a little bit contentious. That religion, people are going to get hot under the collar about this. They would say that, in fact, they would argue that you shouldn't really pick up, or some would say that you shouldn't form your understanding of your spiritual and moral truth from anything else but your religion. Because by doing that, you'd be denying your religion. That's quite a common issue that I've come across. I'm claiming that number one, which is your religion, is insufficient. I'm not saying that it isn't needed, but I'm saying that alone is not enough to come to a clear understanding of an ideology or value system that is compatible with God's own creation. Now that's quite a claim, and some people will get very agitated about that. And I'm sorry, I'm not doing this for that reason. I'm not trying to make people feel uncomfortable. But let's be clear about this. I'm not saying that your religion isn't needed. I'm saying that alone will not give you clarity on forming your ideology when it comes to morality. Okay. Now, next step. Okay. This is about our shared ideology and system of values, because in order to live in a nation and to form a constitutional rule of law, we have to have a shared ideology and value system on which all humans function in that community. Yeah. So to create harmony in a society or a community, there will need to be some agreement on the principles of how you decide morality. Yeah, this is going back to what is right and wrong behavior, and is it a standard at all? Yeah, what is the edge of acceptable behavior? And this is key, right? Because a lot of people will say, well, you know, morality, everybody's morality is different, so we can just make it up as we go along. Really? Because our laws are going to be based on it. And our rule of law, which is the entire constitutional principles of the way that this country functions, or any country functions, is going to be based on that. So we need to look at some deep things, like what is the true nature of freedom? Are there limits to your freedom? Is it purely relative? Can we make it up as we go along? I've already hinted that you can't do that. There's something objective about this. A society will come apart at the seams if there is no agreement on this. Yeah, and we start, people use that phrase, my truth, his truth, her truth. There is a reason for that, and your truth in that context means, more about what you believe inwardly and your what's driving you, and it's more referring to that kind of thing. But we need to understand that there is an objective truth. Yeah, truth is something that you can't alter. It just is. Yeah. So, is it purely relative? Can we make this up as we going along? But as I say, society will come apart if you think that. So, if when deciding those values you base it purely on your theology or your liturgy, your religious teachings, and then claim that others who don't share your religion must abide by those standards, what's going to happen? You're going to generate religious war. And funnily enough, it was that kind of thing that
occurred during the 17th century, and I've just put a video out. Some of you might have seen it. I did a video with Damien Letts on the 17th century glorious revolution, and how all of that was all caused by problems to do with religion. Okay, and you don't want to be going there. That's tricky. I'm not saying that your religion isn't important to you if you have one, but I'm saying that if you form your moral ideology purely on that, and you expect everybody else to do the same on your religion, we've got a problem, haven't we? Yeah. So a shared framework for a community deciding on agreed moral principles must be found because society is a mix of spiritual and secular. Our constitution, our English constitution, although it's closely connected to the Christian church, if you look closely, you'll observe that it is broadly secular. It doesn't specifically articulate biblical teachings in its articles of common law, for example. Why? Because we live in a nation of mixed spiritual and secular traditions. So my question then is there another way of discovering and demonstrating to yourself what morality and truth is? Is there some way in which we can all demonstrate to ourselves that morality is self-evident and something objective? Are there pointers and clues in what we can see around us right now in creation around us, rather than through traditions and what has been passed down to us? So now we're just beginning to step into the occult body of knowledge, right? By looking at the universe, reality, and the world that we live in, the natural order, if you like, we can come to understand that certain human behaviours will naturally be a bad idea, and some will work for our own uplift. Some actions will work in alignment with the natural order, and some do not, and you'll be in conflict. Yeah, this is because everything in reality works on cause and effect. So we're now beginning to look at natural law. We're barely scratching the surface here, but we're just beginning to. We're hinting at it a bit. We're beginning to see, when looking at this topic, that certain truths about morality can come to be known by looking at patterns and tendencies built into our reality. So these microdynamics, if you like, and patterns that we can come to learn about were put into effect by the Creator as its operating conditions. People don't tend to think of it like this, do they? Yeah, this is reality. So you can recognize this whether you are Christian, Jew, Muslim, pagan, whatever it is. Yeah. Even if you don't like the term creator or source or anything else like that, because you are an atheist, you can at least admit that the natural order is bigger than you, that there are forces and dynamics at play and a mystery to the universe that is beyond our control. I think most people would understand that, where I'm talking, and you wouldn't be able to argue against that, I think, very easily. So we can also gain a closer analysis at the human psyche level and look at how that interacts with the universal principles. Okay, so this is the deep study of reality that we're talking about. This is the esoteric body of knowledge. Is all about this stuff that I'm talking about now. Now, what happens if we form our ideology from a religion? So this is where the problems with religion in its exoteric form, that means it's more accessible. Okay, so examples of the larger dynamics to do with freedom would be good to look at now, and that's what we're going to go into. So this is about us beginning to discover patterns that are connected with freedom. Okay, conclusions maybe that we can draw, or deep insights about the relationship of freedom to health. Okay, we're starting to see how freedom is healthy spiritually. Yeah, how freedom is related to self-responsibility. You'll often find, okay, that in spiritual truth we talk about trustworthiness, because trustworthiness is key. Becoming trustworthy as individuals in our society leads us to greater freedoms. Why is that? Because it means that you are governing yourself morally. So there's a relationship between freedom and morality. Yeah?
So there's a dynamic that isn't obvious and clear through religious teachings. I'm not saying it doesn't ever deal with it. It does sometimes, but I don't think it really teases out those insights. Many of these broader patterns and dynamics are not spotted by church-based religion in general. Okay, not always, but in general. So what I'm saying is that I think that religions tend to bridge or bypass this study that we're talking about here. Typically, you won't hear a priest or a vicar talking about immorality in terms of self-sabotage or self-destructive patterns. Yeah, it will normally be about kindness or unkindness to our fellow man, which is also important. So they're not wrong in that at all. Yeah, that's absolutely key as well. Yeah, but you're not. There's more to it. There's a depth to this. Religion, I feel, bridges or bypasses much of this study. Yeah, so this is. Stick with it, okay? If you're finding this a bit awkward, don't worry, okay? I don't think it's a close examination. Religions, I don't think they do a close enough examination of why things go bad for people, yeah, or why things go well for us. That it doesn't tend to deal with the unconscious or the subconscious behaviour of human beings, and that is key. Apologies for the bright sun behind me, by the way. It's not a very good location in the middle of the day, is it? Anyway, hopefully you can still see me okay. So this is borne out in the behaviour, I think, of many who would call themselves religious. Yeah, in whatever faith that might be. You know, I'm actually most familiar with the Christian tradition, simply because I've been brought up in that, okay? But I'm not only talking about the Christian faith, yeah? That was the church tradition that I was brought up in, so I can talk more, a little bit more with authority in that, if you like. So I would say that churchgoers in general completely went along, for example, with the narrative around the rather tricky medical events that happened in 2020. Yeah, vast swathes of people who call themselves Christian were happy to go along with the narrative. And this is other religions too, not picking out Christianity here. Or they were even propping up the idea that we don't need full informed consent before delivering a medical intervention, for example. Yeah, just going along with it. Many in society who were standing their ground on the principle of my body, my choice, for example, were treated very badly by the rest of society, as some of us remember. Some were even suggesting that those who didn't agree to receive an intervention should perhaps be segregated or lose their jobs. Yeah, awful stuff. Yeah, quite the opposite, in fact. What was going on? The church was almost facilitating that consensus, in my view. You know, I remember signs like grab a jab outside a cathedral, for example, because they had select pop-up centres for delivering this medical intervention. So they're fully taking part in that, yeah? Now, I'm not suggesting that there aren't people of religious faiths out there who haven't spotted the problems. But what I am saying is that there's an issue where your religion alone is clearly not delivering clarity here. Yeah, people are not able to get to truth easily. They're not able to see or form their system of values. Something's going wrong. Something's not working, isn't it? Yeah, if you've got vast swathes of a religious faith that aren't spotting this, and we're going to get onto consensus in a moment, yeah? I didn't see, large numbers of church-going Christians speak out in support of individual rights in that situation. My rights end where another's begin. Okay, most people who do understand natural law have at least got that far. They've understood the golden rule. Okay, but what they're missing is the bridging in between. Because what that leads to is an inconsistent application of the golden rule. They don't understand. They miss it. Yeah. I think even churches closed as well. Of course, we had that going on. So and I've also seen churches with blue and yellow signs up supporting the narrative, against Russia about Ukraine, without any idea of what really went on in the history of the Ukraine situation. Not a clue. You know, that in late 2013, this was largely brought about by a Western agitation project, psychological operations, if you like, resulting in what you can really only describe as a coup d'etat or a colour revolution. No idea of any of this. Yeah. So they're not getting their insights. They're not seeing it. Yeah. Again, I'm not trying to tear down religions, but something's not working. You're not getting that wisdom and those insights there. So am I having a go? Kind of, but not entirely. Not entirely. But it's a demonstration that those who are, if you like, tuned in to God's teachings, holy books, church liturgy, are they obtaining that wisdom that is needed, if you like, to come to a clear, logical understanding of their foundational principles? And are they getting a clarity without contradictions on morality? And I would say no. Self-evidently, they're not. Yeah. Going along with consensus, with the consensus, for example, contradicts often in ways that they don't even notice. The my rights end where another's begin, or the golden rule, do no harm, the basis of the understanding of individual rights, yeah, they're missing it because they're going along with a consensus. Yeah, this is the recognition that interfering with another's choices is itself immorality. Yeah, that leads to coercion, force, and violence. Yeah, this is, and then many people in religious communities are completely missing that. Yeah. So this lack of clarity even shows through, by the way, I would say, in the religious texts themselves. Yeah, because, you know, and people are not going to like this, you know. So for example of that is Romans 13, which teaches us to submit to authority, to the powers of government. That completely goes against the golden rule that also comes out of, you could say, in the Bible, the Ten Commandments, the golden rule. So we've got a contradiction there right within the texts. Okay, that in turn is contrary to the properly functioning human who governs himself and learns to take responsibility. Yeah, religion typically doesn't teach us that there is no virtue in merely doing what you're told. Most churchgoers wouldn't go along with that one. They'd be horrified. It's just, or at least they would think, oh gosh, that's quite jarring. I've never thought of it like that before. Yeah, well, there's an indication that something's not right. Yeah, the Christian Bible has, I think, distortions in interpretations. Yeah, and keep in mind, of course, that there have been attempts at the manipulation of those texts too through history. Yeah, issues with translation, issues with interpretation, and so on, because of the fallibility of man. Doesn't mean to say that there aren't fabulous truths expressed in the religious texts of different religions. I'm not saying that. There absolutely are. Okay, but are the religious texts that have been passed down generation to generation? I know people will say, "Oh, it's God's law. It's, you know, it's the word of God and all of that sort of stuff." I'm sorry, but there are contradictions, and we do know in history, for example, about the Council of Nicaea and the Flavian dynasty and the desire for the influential in the late Roman periods to put down the breaking out of freedoms around the Mediterranean once and for all. We needed to do that. We need to deal with that. Yeah. So there's all sorts of manipulation that's gone on, and to just accept, right, that everything that you are told through man's writings that's been passed down, now you could say it's God's law, but just accepting that is, I don't think that's enough. Why? Because God wants you to look at how he's imbued reality itself and the creation with hints and clues at how perhaps we should conduct ourselves. I think he's basically saying, if you believe in God, I think he would probably be saying, well, why the hell aren't you using your reason and logic as well, which I gave you? See, that's important. That's the whole thing about, you know. And so he would say, yeah, look at natural law because it's part of my creation. Yeah, that's the point, right? So they're missing the piece that becomes clear through esoteric teachings. Yeah, I'm not saying that there aren't important truths, for example, in the Christian biblical teachings or of the other faiths. I'm not saying that. Of course there are. But you can't expect others as well to form their values and principles on the basis of a religion that they don't adhere to. Yeah, our foundational shared ideology needs to become informed by universal truths that can be recognized by all of us by looking at creation, the natural order. Still created by God. It's your God that created the natural order through which we can see the natural laws that were put into effect by him. And they're pretty sound as well. So, now this is going to be challenging. If your religion is true, then you'll probably find that the truths recognized in creation through that esoteric study will support your faith too. Funny that. So your spiritual understanding of your own faith will be strengthened, not weakened. That's what I'm proposing. Natural law sits at the root of many spiritual traditions. Yet some question over whether natural law is enough for your full realization and salvation. I'm not saying that. Yeah, is it going to give you what your full faith and religion gives? Possibly, possibly not. I'm not saying that. I'm not judging that one way or the other. But it is the foundation, and it will point to whether your religion is compatible with truth and reality in ways that you hadn't necessarily seen before. It will almost certainly deepen your faith by giving you an angle or dimension that previously you might not have seen. So I'm just going to look at the time, how far we've gone. Oh, this is going to get on to an hour. Let's keep going. So, advanced knowledge. So this is the advanced bit of this video, but we're not getting into advanced natural law. We're still scratching the surface, right? This is still about the esoteric. Now, looking at this is going to raise your game, okay? But it takes time and it takes work. You know, if you're not up for that, then back out now. Yeah, you can remain in the exoteric, that's fine. And you would have to consider yourself not initiated in that situation. Okay, that's fine. Yeah, but that's going to trigger people, I suspect. So this is about examining the patterns, dynamics, and deep observations made through the understanding of natural law. And I'm going to read out some examples now of these dynamics that we can come to learn from this deep study. So if you don't learn, here's the first one. If you don't learn to act morally and authentically, and we'll get on to clarifying what that is in a minute, people will learn not to trust you. So there's a dynamic at play there. Okay, I'm just going to read through some of these because these are sort of insights that you sometimes will get through religion. Of course you will, but some of them you won't. Some of them will be quite surprising. Force or coercion will bring about anger and resentment within the human psyche. Okay, look for coercion in people's beliefs and the things that they're proposing. Yeah, in the narratives that people support. Look out for coercion. So coercion, that's people pushing you to do something against your will, yeah, is denying another individual's choices. This brings about anger and resentment because it prevents them from being able to be self-determining. You are denying their self-ownership. So what we're getting to there is the heart of immorality, if you like, is denying somebody their own choices to be self-determining. There are limits for that, though. Organising others against their will is the activity of collectivists, adherers to the ideology of collectivism, which we need to reject. Okay, these people who they gave you they try to argue that they have the right to determine others' actions. Yeah, and if you think about that in the context of a state, we would call that statism. Yeah, where does the authority come from for a nation's administration, what we think of as government, to coerce an individual based on a policy? Yeah, that's why the true rule of law must be based on the people's own judgment of justice, the people's constitution. This is why I know that underneath the English constitution, and it's why the English constitution is legitimate, because it's based on self-ownership. That's the key, right? So here's something a bit more about in the world of psychology. Not paying attention causes one to adopt false beliefs. You don't have to action false beliefs. Sometimes it comes about from the lack of attention or the lack of action. Yeah, majority or consensus opinion is to be regarded with suspicion. Lazy majority. We're going to look at that a little bit more in a bit more detail in a moment. Okay. Doing what you're told is not virtuous. We've already talked about that, because you're not using your moral compass. Yeah, it doesn't mean that you can't do what is being suggested. Yeah, sometimes that will be the right action, but you have to consider it. That includes the problems in, say, government departments automatically doing what they're told from central government instead of realising that they have a responsibility to push back using their conscience and discretion. Yeah, law is not necessarily what is deemed to be so through legislation. Self-governance and a lack of submission to others leads to responsibility and self-governance. So there's a problem with Romans 13 I was talking about in the Bible. Yeah. In spiritual science, health is equated to freedom. Freedom to make your own decisions. Freedom is not necessarily safety or comfort, but it is healthy. Freedom is healthy. So a compliant society is an unhealthy one. Going along and doing what you're told to do, just doing that all the time, is unhealthy spiritually. Yeah, these are the sorts of dynamics that you won't hear that being said in a religious setting, that kind of thing often. Self-determination is healthy. Internally, it leads to satisfaction, fulfillment, and growth. And there's the evidence in our psychology and physiology that man functions best when he is not being expected to follow orders or submit to an external authority. Self-determination. Now, that is not discussed generally in church. Why not? Difficult. Freedom is not safety. Okay, morality is not interference in others' affairs. That's what's moral. Don't interfere in others' affairs, unless you're calling out wrongdoing, and we have to look at that. We have to clarify that. Observing long-term interests. This is quite a deep one. Suspending instant gratification causes a convergence with the interests of others. It leads to harmony. That's an interesting dynamic, and that's quite a sophisticated one. In general, our interests harmonise when we think more medium-term and then long-term, because it demonstrates patience and discipline. Now, the church does talk about that often. Brilliant. But in general, it doesn't explain the why and the how behind it. Yeah, a spiritually evolved society is one in which people self-govern or are even self-masters. Yeah, adhering to legislation is order following. Talked about that a lot in my constitutional stuff. A society pervaded by legislation is based on fear. Fear leads to the desire to create a society in which everything is segmented, modelled, chopped into categories, turned into algorithms. I've talked about this before. Pre-mapped procedures. Yeah. I talked about that quite a lot with Ben Rubin, actually, in one of my interviews recently. Does that ring a bell? Yeah, society is going that way more and more. Left-brained. We've got to pre-model everything ahead of time. Yeah. Spiritual immaturity is demonstrated through the inability to cope with unknown outcomes. The spiritually immature adopt extreme positions, lack of nuance, and a lack of discernment. Or you could say an oversimplification. I've talked about that recently in my January message. If you haven't seen that, whiz over and go and have a look at that as well. Yeah, and this is a deep one. Equity is the check on free will. Yeah, my rights end where another's begin. This is going back to that again. The golden rule. Do unto others as you would have done to you. But a better expression of that, which you learn through esoteric science, is to put it into the negative, in what we call the apophatic, which is, because it's clearer that way, do not do unto others as you would not have done unto you. Yeah, why? Because you're defining the boundaries or the edges. Yeah, putting things into the apophatic sometimes is much clearer when you have a field of possibility. You can't really define rights very easily because it's like everything that isn't these things. In other words, it's the things that you shouldn't do that are often more definable, which is why we go into the apophatic there. So this is quite subtle stuff. Now, let's summarize those things even further. Just to a few things, right? Self-determination is health. Not doing what you're told. It's not about doing what you're told. You need to consult your moral compass. Doing what you're told is not necessarily moral. In fact, it's never moral, just going along with what you're told to do. Yeah, because you are suspending that moral compass. Benefiting from your own choices creates feedback loops of satisfaction and a sense of fulfillment, which is why it's important to be self-governing. Self-governance leads to a sense of responsibility, self-confidence and growth. Self-governance is what God wants, self-evidently. Yeah, the evidence is in the way he created our reality. You can start to see in all these things that we're looking at, in all these dynamics, you can start to see that God actually wants you to take ownership of yourself and grow in responsibility. Not just to do what is submit to a central authority. Now that's a demonstration there of what God wants for us, which is self-ownership. That's absolutely key, that. So that's the root of the legitimacy of the rule of law. It's based on the people ruling themselves. It's what I've been saying all along, not submitting to or outsourcing to an authority. We self-govern, yeah, or become a self-master individually. Then if things go wrong in the community, then the community self-governs through the jury. That's the community governing itself in the collective through the council of 12 individuals. Right? You can see why I've been saying all of this all along. That's an indication that the English Constitution has legitimacy because it's in alignment with truth. Not because of great texts that have been passed down by things that people have written. It's because it's self-evident. Now, I want to just go into false beliefs. This is getting long. Wow, we're on 50-something minutes now. Okay, false beliefs. Now, this is really important. I want to go into one or two of these things more deeply about the unconscious. Okay, and this will demonstrate to you why it is that the general sort of dig into morality through religion and faith, I don't think is enough. Okay, so here's how false beliefs come about. So this comes about through going along with things that seem or appear on the surface to be a good idea at the time. It's all incremental. Yeah, ideas are proposed in society or put onto the table by influential people in our communities, and through laziness or lack of scrutiny of everyone else, including those in government, by the way, plans are advanced and ideas are adopted because it sort of resonates, if you like, with convenience or with going along with already held beliefs. Yeah, so it's more comfortable for all to accept. Yeah, that leads to unintended consequences through lazy thinking in the aggregate. Yeah, there has been an insufficient attention or focus on topics which causes people to take a dangerous direction, yeah, often without fully realizing what they are doing. Yeah, that's the key. It's being done almost without consciousness, without awareness. That's what we mean by consciousness, yeah? The consensus becomes dangerous. And that consensus wasn't so much positive conscious decisions, it was more just flowing with what everyone is thinking, unconsciously. So that's my point, yeah? So often it's about the need to correct the course that you're already on. Yeah, it's more about choosing to turn off the default route, change the points on your track, if you like, onto the branch line. That's the path of truth, rather than just choosing to stay on the route that you're already on. Yeah, most of us just, unconsciously just go with the flow. But quite often that can cause problems. Yeah, harm to others can occur unconsciously. Yeah, that going along with things can cause harm to other people. So man can become a danger to himself through faulty or lazy thinking. Think about that for a moment. Yeah, and he typically doesn't even spot it. So the bullying collective, that's the majority, can become an enemy of free will. That's the very free will that was given to all of us by God, by the way. Can you see the contradiction? Yeah, that's why majority rule or voting is dangerous. That's why you need to become clear as to why that's a problem. And our new rule of law since the Glorious Revolution and the Bill of Rights is all about adult suffrage, which is majority rule or voting in elections. That's why it's dangerous, because often the majority reaches its conclusions about something lazily and subconsciously. The public's perceptions can often be weaponized against them. Yeah, the unwitting victims of manipulation are just as often found in the conspiracy-leaning communities or the freedom movement as well. So don't think that just because you've woken up to conspiracy that you are immune to this kind of manipulation. No way. There's loads of manipulation going on in the freedom movement. Yeah, but their perception, that's people in the freedom movement, is often that they've nailed it all. Why? Because they've found conspiracy. Yeah, and that's sometimes why it makes people in the freedom movement more dangerous sometimes, because they think that they have sorted it. Not the case necessarily at all. So a majority, often, not always, becomes the bully of society, causing the breaching of the free will of the often better informed minority. Yeah, this is uncomfortable for people, isn't it? Often. Sometimes you're removing people's free will when you become part of an ignorant mass that goes along with things. Because what you're doing effectively is kind of green lighting or propping up a lie as truth, pretending it's truth when it actually isn't. Yeah? I don't think you get these deep insights, unless you go into this stuff properly. And this is all about the occulted body of knowledge. So these great insights that, are coming up to the surface a bit more, and we're only scratching the surface. This really is esoteric science. It's what we're looking at. So the highest adherence to natural law is don't remove another person's choices. Yeah, that's the kindest thing that you can do. Now we're getting to starting to kind of really get at what morality is. Being moral means leave people alone and stop interfering unless you think they might need help, in which case we should dive in and offer that help, definitely. But you can't legislate for that. Yeah, you can't decide for somebody else at what point they should help a third person. It's not your decision to do that. Yeah, that's a spiritual decision. Neglecting to do things that you know you need to do will also cause negative consequences. And denying things that are real, in reality, in truth, will also cause negative consequences. Pretending things that are not the way they really are is a problem. Pretending that something is true in your own mind when it isn't will create chaos in your life and quite possibly others around you as well. See, now we're really getting into the study of natural law. This develops prejudice and bias within oneself without you noticing. Yeah, taking on untruths, thinking that they're true in your head when they're actually not, will start to cause biases and prejudices. This is how problems come about in your psyche. And this is what Carl Jung was talking about. Yeah, I'm really rattling through stuff because I'm trying to pack this into a manageable video. Yeah, lying to yourself about reality and truth by imagining a preferred truth means you are out of control. Your imagined truth can come about without you noticing. That's the subconscious. Yeah. Therefore, according to natural law, you can do evil without even intending it. So, an interesting book, and there's an audio version of it online, is a book by an individual called M. Scott Peck called The People of the Lie. Have a look for it. Really interesting. Yeah, now, that whole idea of you being able to do evil without you even noticing it is an even higher standard or bar that is set than common law. Yeah, common law, which is our man-made reflection of natural law, if you like,
actually requires mens rea. It's what we call mens rea in Latin, which is intent. It looks at your intent and your state of mind when you were supposedly committing that crime. Yeah? But natural law is an even higher standard, which is that, no, you might not have even intended it quite, and you might not have spotted it, and it's all down to your subconscious, but you're still doing evil on somebody. You're still going to get karmic consequence back for that. This is why we need to learn about natural law, because you treading through life in an unconscious way can create chaos for you and for other people. This is why this is important stuff. Yeah. So let's just get into the improvements of your life. This is the great thing about natural law, is that engaging in it and studying it and becoming familiar with it causes you to improve your life and the life of people around you as well. So I'm just reading some things here. Yeah, we're often programmed to believe that most of what happens to us in life is more dependent upon what happens to us from outside ourselves. I don't think that's true. Yeah, I think your life improves not quite so much through external influences, but more by looking closely at how you think, your attitudes that you adopt, the beliefs that you take on consciously, and the decisions that you make, and the actions that you, most of all, the actions that you take as a result of all of that. Yep, that's going to make a bigger difference, which is why I keep talking about in the videos that I put out about this is less about conspiracy and more about the people at large getting their thinking straightened out and getting their morality straightened out and their principles and values really solid, so they're sharp on this stuff, because that means that the incorrect rule of law out there would start to wither away, because it wouldn't be able to cope, it wouldn't be able to exist in the context of people really getting centered on this stuff that I'm talking about now. Yeah, you can change your life on this stuff. It's all about self-improvement and analysis of self. Yeah, so we're getting into shadow work, we're getting into Carl Jung's material, all of that kind of stuff. So the need for a higher consciousness. So what does that look like? It starts to demonstrate. You start to demonstrate when you start to get this right. You're able to hold your focus for longer. You're starting to focus on the right things, on the causes. You're becoming more alert. Yeah, it relates to unconscious consensus. You're going to spot that kind of stuff faster. You're not going to be able to be tricked through false ideologies or programming as easily. This is good stuff. You're going to want this, right? It's about setting intentions for your self-improvement, sharpening one's perception. This is all about bringing about a better quality of life, being naturally skeptical of what's around us. Don't know what I've typed there. Can't understand what I've put there, but it doesn't matter. We're going to have to go through more challenges I've written here actually in order to experience catalyzation. So in other words, the universe is delivering a lot of this bad stuff to us at the moment because they're all about learning lessons of contrast. That's really what it's about, yeah. And we're probably going to get more challenges as a result of this. Why? Because people out there aren't learning about this. Yeah, they're not seeing really what the real causes are. They're not sharpening their insights enough, and not looking at what all of this really comes back to is less about conspiracists, although yeah, it is about that too, of course, but it's actually more about us being manipulated. Yeah, and we are easily manipulated because we don't understand this. That's the key. So this is about a deeper awakening. That's going to have to come about. It's not just about conspiracy. It's not just about hurling hate at those that you perceive as the enemy. It's not about that. Just about that. Yeah, connection with spirit. Get out of your comfort zone. Support people who are risking a lot and sharing information. Absolutely key. This is about multi-level messages. Yeah, I'm putting messages out sometimes to people who, excuse me, who are a bit more
who are a bit more mainstream. And sometimes I'm putting messages out to the more spiritual. Sometimes I'm putting messages out to anarchists, for example. And I get comments, people sort of saying, why are you using that language, Will? Or why are you saying that? Or that's because people forget that I'm actually speaking to multiple people, multiple crowds, different people. Yeah, I'm having to be careful. So, constitutionalists, people who like the constitutional material but have never really looked at this natural law stuff. This is really important, yeah? True equity, that is where we are all equally treated before the law. We're all held to the same set of standards. That's nothing to do with equality on a broader level, or the entitlement generally. Nothing to do with that, yeah? Equity comes from all of us judging justice for ourselves, self-governance. The law is not what some specialist comes up with through a technical understanding. Yeah, it's not what man has created. The law must not offend the common man's principles of conscience, of what is fair and just. Lord Devlin said that. Yeah, as long as he, the juror, has done his own work on himself and is honest with himself about consistent application of principles. So we, potential jurors, have to be careful too that we get our own thinking straightened out. That's really important, because the powers that be are probably infused with terror and worry about what it would mean to say, right, we're going to have full trial by jury now and full jury independence. Yeah, I suspect that many of them would be concerned about that. Why? Because people are not straightened out ideologically either. Yeah, and so we have a responsibility to self-improve as well in order to be able to step into that role of being a juror in society. Yeah. Man is a potential danger to himself. So yeah, whilst it is morally correct in truth that the rule of law must be based on justice delivered through the consciences of the ordinary man, those people must take responsibility not to get themselves into difficulty by not addressing their own unconsciousness. People need to come to understand that the test for legitimacy for the rule of law is not how good its historical pedigree is. You know, whether it's backed up by great historical documents or rests on the actions of the great men of history. It's not that. The rule of law's legitimacy is based on whether its principles align with truth itself. Yeah? In other words, it's a recognition that the rule of law cannot function in any other way. As the founding fathers of the American Constitution hinted at, it's all based on inevitabilities. We hold these truths to be self-evident. Yeah, you can't argue with it. That's what natural law is all about. That's what the esoteric sciences are all about. It gives you a foundation of understanding that is much deeper and foundational, rather than scrabbling around for proof in historical documents. It's not about that. I mean, it's about that too, maybe, but fundamentally it's more about this. Yeah? Stop looking for proof and test the legitimacy of everything with natural law principles. Yeah, but in order to do that, you're going to need to become familiar with it first. That's the key. Yeah, not just familiar also, but you need to get it under your skin. You need to be able to express it to others and hold a conversation with people about this stuff. Otherwise, you won't have got it. It won't sit deeply in your understanding. Yeah? And if you do have a faith, a religious faith, I'll say it again. It will almost certainly strengthen it. That is, if that faith is based in truth. Because they're not all, actually. Yeah, because as I said, if your religious tradition you hold is somehow in conflict with reality, with what we see in the creation, then there must be a problem somewhere. So, that's the way to test it, isn't it? And ultimately, this is really about the philosophies of individualism and collectivism. And I've done a video series on this. Yeah, I'm going to put the link into the description as well.
on this series that I've done on individualism and collectivism, and it hasn't had enough views. Yeah, because what this is about is stepping through logically and demonstrating why individualism is in alignment with natural law and truth, and why collectivism must be rejected because of its destructive nature. Yeah, it hasn't had enough views. I spent hours on those videos breaking that down logically and carefully so that people could look at those and go, my God, this is really full of logical insights that you can't really argue with. That's why I did it. Okay, and then you need to go out and look at the material of Mark Passio, Corey Endralat, Larkin Rose, and others. Now, those people don't understand the constitutional bit, by the way. That's their blind spot. Because they think that as soon as you talk about a constitution, there you're talking about government. Yeah, and as I've often said, under the legitimate English constitution, it denigrates government or brings it down. It places the people in authority over their own government every day through trial by jury, which means that the government isn't really a government at all. It's the people that are the government in that situation, and the government is nothing more than just an administration. Yeah, which means that the English constitution is different from many other constitutions. That's why it's legitimate. You know, get that under your skin so that you can re-express it to others, because the people are governing themselves through the jury. Yeah, what's the government in that situation in the English constitution? It's the jury. The jury is the highest council of law, being self-governing. Fantastic. Yeah. Anything else I need to say? Yeah, so get into that. And it's then at that point that the Constitution is something more than just another man-made law or doctrinal law. Yeah, it's something that you just know to be true. It can't work any other way. Yeah, that's the key. Wow, that was a long video. And I've got it down to 1 hour and 11 minutes. There you go. Unless I take bits out, which I might do. But ladies and gentlemen, I hope you found that interesting and useful. I've temporarily stopped my courses, as you may have noticed, but I'm going to kick them off again. So I'm going to do it in a way that is more broken up into pieces so that you can sort of pick bits. But hopefully that, you know, I'm going to be putting some information out about that. And if you're interested in getting into this stuff a bit more deeply, that's your opportunity to do so, because I'm going to put some sessions in place, maybe some Q&A sessions to start with on different aspects of this. But I hope you found that really useful, and you do get into natural law. Don't be scared of it. Even if you are religious, it should be a great thing for your faith and your understanding. It should strengthen it. So get into it, and I hope that makes that clear for you and you find that interesting. Cheers for now.